Listen to me, because I'm about to tell you something that nobody wants to say out loud. Something that social media will crucify you for saying. Something that will get you canceled by people who mistake compassion for wisdom. But I'm going to say it anyway because I'm tired of watching men destroy their futures for a woman and children that were never going to value them in the first place. I'm Vark, and this is the truth about stepfatherhood that evolution designed into your biology but culture has been teaching you to ignore. The subtitle of this is simple. Never become a stepfather if you don't already have children of your own. And before you get offended, before you start typing angry comments about how this is hateful or misogynistic or whatever other label you want to throw at me, understand something fundamental. This is not about hating single mothers. This is not about demonizing children. This is not about pretending blended families never work. This is about biology. This is about evolutionary psychology. This is about what actually happens to the male brain and male psychology when you step into a situation that your DNA was never designed to handle. We need to talk about male psychology for a second, because most men have absolutely no idea why they feel the way they do when they're in a step-family situation. Your brain, the male brain, evolved over millions of years to value certain things. It evolved to value paternity certainty. It evolved to value biological investment. It evolved to recognize and reward genetic continuation. These are not moral positions. These are biological imperatives. And when you step into a role as a stepfather, you are stepping directly against these imperatives. You are, at a genetic level, being asked to invest resources, time, emotional energy, and money into another man's genetic legacy. That is not natural. That is not how your biology is wired. And the fact that culture has convinced you that this is noble and good doesn't change what your DNA is telling you. Let me give you the evolutionary perspective here. For the vast majority of human history, step-families didn't really exist in the way they do today. Single motherhood was rare. Women who had children without a husband were often either widows or outcasts. And men who took on another man's children were extremely rare because it made no evolutionary sense. A man's primary drive at a biological level is to pass on his own genes. A man will sacrifice, work, invest, and fight for his own children because on a deep biological level, he understands that his genetic legacy depends on it. But ask him to do that for another man's child. That goes against everything his body is telling him. Now, I'm not saying every stepfather relationship fails. I'm not saying men are incapable of loving stepchildren. I'm saying that what you're asking a man to do is fight against his own biology every single day. You're asking him to show up, invest his resources, give his emotional energy, and potentially face rejection from children who will never see him as their real father. Because here's the thing about stepchildren that nobody talks about. The loyalty is never clean. The stepchild is biologically programmed to see the biological father as the father. Even if that biological father abandoned them, even if that father was abusive, even if that father was completely worthless, there's something in the child's brain that still sees him as the father. And the stepfather is always the outsider. The stepfather is the man who came after. The stepfather is the replacement, and no amount of love and investment will ever change that fundamental reality. And this is where the emotional damage really happens. A man comes into this situation thinking, I'm going to be the good guy. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be the man her biological father wasn't. And then, years later, he hears words that destroy him. You're not my real father. You're not my dad. He's my real dad. And no matter how much love he gave, no matter how much money he spent, no matter what sacrifices he made, those words erase him. Those words tell him that his investment meant nothing, that his sacrifice was meaningless. that despite years of showing up, he will never be enough. That is psychological warfare, and I'm not exaggerating. That is what happens in countless step-families every single day. The stepfather becomes emotionally invested, becomes attached, invests resources, and then gets emotionally demolished by a child who was never actually his to begin with. And where is the protection for him? Where is the social structure that says, wait, we need to make sure this man is protected? Nowhere. Instead, we have a culture that tells him he's selfish if he doesn't want to do this. We have a culture that tells him he's a coward if he sets boundaries. We have a culture that tells him he's not being a man if he refuses to carry another man's burden. But here's what evolutionary psychology tells us. A man who refuses to take on a responsibility that isn't his is not a coward. A man who protects his future is not selfish. A man who sets boundaries is not lacking character. A man is being wise. A man is being strategic. A man is understanding his own biology and not fighting against it. Now let's talk about the mother's responsibility for a second, because this is where it gets really uncomfortable, and this is where I'm going to say something that nobody wants to hear. If you have a child, your primary responsibility is to that child, not your dating life, not your romantic future, not your desire to find a new partner. Your responsibility is to your child. And I understand that single motherhood is hard. I understand that it's lonely. I understand that you want companionship. I understand that you want to feel desired. But here's the evolutionary truth. When you brought a child into this world, you made a choice about your priorities for the next 18 to 23 years. And that choice was about your child, not about yourself. So when single mothers parade new men in and out of their child's life, when they expose their children to multiple father figures, when they ask those men to step into a parenting role, what they're actually doing is prioritizing their own needs over their child's stability. And I know that's harsh to say, but it's true. The research is clear on this. Children need stability. Children need consistency. Children need to know that the adults in their life are committed to their well-being, not to finding their next romantic partner. And when a mother brings a new man into the household and asks him to step into a parenting role, she's creating a situation where the child might become emotionally attached to that man, only to have him leave when the relationship inevitably fails. That is not good parenting. That is prioritizing your own emotional needs over your child's psychological safety. The stepfather situation is one of the most dangerous situations in modern family dynamics, and almost nobody talks about it. You have a man who is not the biological father trying to enforce rules. You have a child who doesn't respect his authority because he didn't establish it from birth. You have a biological father who may or may not be in the picture, creating divided loyalties. You have a mother who is juggling two relationships and often feels torn between protecting her new relationship and protecting her children. It's a psychological minefield, and we act like it's normal. We act like it's fine. We act like we just need to work harder at blending the family and everything will be okay. But it won't be okay, because you can't blend biology. You can't blend genetics. You can't erase the fact that a child's loyalty will always be to their biological parents, even if those parents don't deserve it. Let me tell you what actually happens in the mind of a stepchild. You have a child who, at a biological level, has already bonded with their biological parents. That bond is deep, it's primal, it's genetic. When a new man comes into the picture, that child experiences him as a threat to the relationship with the biological father. Even if the biological father is absent or abusive, there's something in the child's brain that wants to protect that bond. So the child resists the stepfather. The child acts out. The child refuses to accept his authority. And the stepfather, confused and hurt, doesn't understand why his love and investment aren't working. He doesn't understand that he's fighting against millions of years of evolution. He's fighting against the child's genetic programming, and he's going to lose that fight because genetics always wins. Now, let's talk about what I call the stepfather trap. A man meets a woman. She's attractive, she's intelligent, she seems like a good person, but she has children. The man, being biologically driven to seek a mate, overlooks the red flag. He tells himself, I can handle this. I can be different. I can be the good guy that her ex wasn't. And so he commits. He moves in. He starts acting as a father figure. And then, slowly, the reality sets in. He realizes that he's not actually in charge. The mother is. And the mother is torn between two loyalties, her loyalty to her children and her loyalty to him. And most of the time, her children will win. Because at an evolutionary level, a mother's primary responsibility is to her children, not to her romantic partner. So the stepfather ends up in this impossible position where he has all the responsibility of a father, but none of the authority. He's expected to discipline the children, but when he does, the mother undermines him. He's expected to contribute financially, but he has no say in how the money is spent. He's expected to love the children, but the children don't love him back. He's trapped in a role that was never designed for success. And the pain that results from this is real. It's not just emotional, it's psychological. It's a form of repeated rejection and humiliation that accumulates over years. A man who steps into a step-family situation without going in with his eyes wide open is essentially volunteering for psychological torture. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not. The research on step-family dynamics is clear. Stepfathers report higher rates of depression, anxiety, and emotional burnout than biological fathers. Stepfathers report higher rates of infidelity because they're often seeking emotional validation elsewhere. Stepfathers report higher rates of relationship breakdown because the marriage eventually collapses under the weight of divided loyalties and unmet expectations. This is not because stepfathers are bad men. This is because we've asked them to do something that their biology was never designed to do. Now, let's talk about what evolutionary psychology tells us about male investment. A man will invest in what he values, and a man values what is genetically his. A man will work 18-hour days to provide for his biological children. A man will take a bullet for his biological child. A man will sacrifice his future for his biological child. But ask him to do that for another man's child? The level of commitment is fundamentally different. And that's not cruelty, that's biology. That's how male psychology is structured. And I'm not saying that stepfathers don't love their stepchildren. I'm saying that the love is different. The commitment is different. The sense of responsibility is different. And when push comes to shove, a man's allegiance will be to what is his. This is actually called parental investment theory in evolutionary psychology, and it explains basically everything about male behavior when it comes to family. The theory states that organisms will invest resources into offspring in proportion to the likelihood that those resources will result in the propagation of their own genes. For men, this is incredibly straightforward. Biological offspring equals genetic propagation. Stepchildren equals zero genetic propagation. So from an evolutionary standpoint, the investment calculation is completely different. A man's brain is literally wired to care more about his biological children than about his stepchildren. This isn't something he chooses. This isn't something he can overcome through moral force or positive thinking. This is hardwired into his neurobiology. And when we ask men to violate this biological imperative in the name of love or compassion, we're setting them up to fail. We're asking them to go against what 4 million years of evolution has built into their nervous system. And the cognitive dissonance that results from that is what creates the psychological damage. A man feels guilty for not loving his stepchildren as much as his biological children, even though his brain is literally telling him that this is correct. A man feels ashamed for being resentful about spending money on another man's genetic legacy. A man feels like he's a bad person for not wanting to be a stepfather. But he's not a bad person. He's just experiencing the conflict between what his biology wants and what his culture is telling him he should want. And that conflict creates psychological damage. And here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. The stepmother and stepfather situation is asymmetrical. A woman can step into a stepmother role much more easily than a man can step into a stepfather role. Why? Because female biology is not as dependent on genetic certainty. A woman's reproductive strategy is different from a man's. A woman's primary drive is to acquire resources and stability for her children. A woman can relatively easily care for stepchildren because those children still need resources and stability, which is what she's biologically driven to provide. But a man's primary drive is genetic legacy, and a man has absolutely no genetic legacy in someone else's children. So the asymmetry in the step-parent situation is fundamental. It's built into our biology, and yet we treat step-parenting like it should be symmetrical. We act like men and women should have the same capacity to step into these roles, but they don't. And that mismatch is what creates so much suffering. Let me be very specific about what happens in the male brain when a man is in a step-family situation. There's constant cognitive dissonance. He loves the woman, so he wants to invest in her children. But his DNA is telling him not to. He feels good about being a good guy, so he shows up and tries hard. But his brain is keeping score, and the score is never high enough because the children will never truly be his. He makes financial contributions, but there's a part of him that resents it because he's not investing in his own genetic future. He enforces rules, but the children don't respect his authority because he's not their biological father. He tries to build a bond, but that bond is always secondary to the bond with the biological father. And over time, this cognitive dissonance creates resentment, and that resentment creates distance, and that distance creates the very rejection that he was trying to prevent. So the stepfather situation often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The man tries so hard to avoid rejection that he sets himself up for it. He invests so much emotionally that the return is never proportional. He sacrifices so much that he ends up empty. And then, after years of this, he either explodes in anger or he quietly withdraws. And in either case, the step-family dynamic gets worse, not better. This is not a moral failing on his part. This is a predictable outcome of asking a man to violate his own biology day after day after day. So here's what I want to say directly to men who are considering stepping into a stepfather role. Do not do it. Do not do it if you don't already have children of your own. Do not do it if you're looking for validation or a sense of purpose. Do not do it thinking that your love will be enough. Do not do it thinking that you're going to be different. Do not do it thinking that you're going to fix the situation. Because you won't. You'll just end up broken. You'll end up financially drained. You'll end up emotionally devastated. You'll end up wondering why you sacrificed so much for people who never valued you. And by the time you realize it, years will have passed. Your best years will have been spent trying to be a good guy in a situation that was never designed to reward good guys. So instead, I want you to set a boundary. I want you to say no. I want you to tell the woman you're dating that if you're going to be with her, she needs to understand that you're not going to step into a parenting role. You're not going to enforce rules. You're not going to try to be a father. You're going to be a friend. You're going to be supportive. But you're not going to sacrifice your future for her biological children. And if she can't accept that, then she's not the woman for you. Because a woman who really loves you will not ask you to do that. A woman who really loves you will understand that you deserve better. A woman who really loves you will prioritize her relationship with you over her need for you to be a father figure. But most women won't do that. Most women will see a man who is willing to step into a stepfather role and think, great, I've got a guy who will help me raise my kids. She won't be thinking about his well-being. She won't be thinking about his future. She won't be thinking about what this will cost him psychologically. She'll just be thinking about what she needs. And that's not love, that's using. Now let's talk about the single mother situation, because this is important too. Look, I understand that single motherhood is hard. I understand that it's lonely. I understand that you want companionship. But your responsibility is to your children, not to yourself. Your responsibility is to create stability, not chaos. Your responsibility is to protect your children from multiple father figures rotating in and out of their lives. That is not deprivation. That is parenting. If you have a child and you're not with the biological father, then your dating life needs to be on hold. Your social life needs to be secondary. Your desire for companionship needs to be less important than your child's psychological stability. And I know that's not what modern culture tells you. Modern culture tells you that you can have it all. You can be a single mother and a dating woman and a romantic partner all at the same time. But that's not true. Those things are in conflict. And every single time you prioritize your dating life over your child's stability, you're making a choice. You're choosing your own needs over your child's needs. And that will have long-term consequences for your child. The research is clear on this. Children from step-family situations report higher rates of anxiety, depression, behavioral problems, and poor academic performance. Not because blended families are inherently bad, but because of the instability, the divided loyalties, and the confusion about who is actually responsible for what. So here's what I want to say to single mothers. If you're going to bring a man into your home, make sure he understands exactly what he is and isn't signing up for. Make sure he knows that he is not the father. Make sure he knows that his authority with your children is limited. Make sure he knows that his relationship with you will always be secondary to your relationship with your children. And if he can't accept that, then don't bring him around your children. Keep your dating life and your parenting life separate. That's not depriving your children, that's protecting them. So let's bring this back to evolutionary psychology for a second. What we're really talking about here is the biological incompatibility between male investment strategy and stepfatherhood. For millions of years, a man's investment strategy was simple. He invested in his biological children because that's where his genetic future was. He didn't invest in other men's children because that made no evolutionary sense. But modern culture has asked us to override that biology. Modern culture has asked us to pretend that a man's love and investment should be equal across his biological children and his stepchildren. But that's fighting against 4 million years of evolution, and you cannot override evolution through willpower and positive thinking. You cannot override evolution through cultural conditioning. Evolution always wins. So when a man says that he doesn't want to be a stepfather, he's not being selfish, he's being wise. When a man says that he wants his own biological children, he's not being immature, he's being honest. When a man says that he's not going to invest in another man's genetic legacy, he's not being cruel, he's being strategic. These are all healthy, normal, evolved positions, and we need to start treating them that way. We need to stop shaming men for having boundaries. We need to stop guilt-tripping men into sacrificing their futures. We need to stop celebrating men who destroy themselves, trying to fix broken family situations that were never their responsibility to fix in the first place. So here's my final word on this. If you're a man, know your own mind, know your own values, know what you actually want from a relationship, and do not compromise on this. Do not let a woman guilt you into being a stepfather. Do not let a woman manipulate you into thinking that you're selfish for wanting your own biological children. Do not let a woman convince you that you're not a man if you refuse to step into her family drama, because she's lying, and the only person who is going to protect your future is you. If you're a woman, understand that your primary responsibility is to your children. Understand that bringing multiple men in and out of your child's life is harmful to that child. Understand that expecting a man to step into a parenting role without clear boundaries is unfair to him. Understand that a healthy blended family requires the woman to prioritize her children's stability over her own romantic needs. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be dating. I'm Vark, and this is the truth about stepfatherhood that your biology evolved into you, but your culture has been teaching you to ignore. If this message resonated with you, comment below and tell me what you think. If you know a man who is struggling with being a stepfather, share this with him. If you know a woman who is using her children as bait to trap a man into a relationship, maybe this will help her see things differently. Subscribe to this channel because we talk about the real evolution of human behavior, not the sanitized version that makes everyone feel good, but leaves men and children actually broken. This is Vark el Neanderthal, and I'm here to tell you the truth about human nature, human sexuality, human family dynamics, and human psychology. Not the version that makes you feel good, the version that actually works, the version that actually protects people. So subscribe, comment, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, evolution designed your biology for a reason. Stop fighting it. Start respecting it. Start making choices based on what's actually true instead of what sounds compassionate. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's how you build a life worth living.